Hey guys, this is Mrs. Oyen, and today we are going to be learning about probability. All right, you are going to be taking some notes on the note sheet that I gave you in class today, and I expect you to come with those notes filled in to class tomorrow. You also will be writing a couple of problems down in your notebook or on a sheet of paper. You also need to bring that to class tomorrow. All right, at any time, if you have a question or if you need to hear something again, just pause the video and rewind it. Okay, and then watch the concept again until you get it. All right, so again, today we're working with probability. All right, the first thing that we're going to talk about, you don't have to put these in your notes yet, we're going to talk about what outcomes and events are. All right, so I'm going to kind of read through this and you guys can follow along. All right, so it says an experiment is an activity with varying results. You guys do experiments in science all the time. So an experiment is just something you're doing, like rolling a number cube, spinning a spinner. That's an experiment. All right. The possible results of an experiment are called outcomes. Okay, so if I flip a coin, my two outcomes are heads or tails. Those are the possible things I could get. If I roll a normal dice or die, I could get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. Those are my outcomes. All right. So if I look at these marbles here, all right, each of these marbles is an outcome. There's 6 possible outcomes. There's 6 different things I could get if I was drawing these marbles out of a bag. Okay. So those are my outcomes. All right, we're going to take a couple notes on our note sheet, which I gave you today. All right, and we're going to start with experiment. If at any time you need to pause, just pause the video and copy down the words. So the first word is an experiment. So that's the activity with varying results. Flipping a coin, rolling a number cube, those are experiments. The second word is outcome. That's the possible results of an experiment. Okay, so getting tails when flipping a coin, that's an outcome. It's getting a heads or getting a tails. The third word is an event. That's a collection of all the possible outcomes. So if I listed all of the outcomes that were possible, that would be considered my event. So if I flipped a coin, my possible outcomes are heads and tails. That's my event. All right, make sure you have those words filled in your note page. All right, so let's take a look at a problem. I just want you to kind of follow along as I do this. So I have a number cube, numbered 1 through 6. My first question says, what are the possible outcomes? All right, well, I would list them. I could get a 1, a 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. All right, my next question says, what are the favorable outcomes of rolling an even number? So that means, well, which numbers could I roll that would give me an even outcome? Well, I could roll a 2, a 4, or a 6. Those are my even numbers. Okay, question C says, what are the favorable outcomes of rolling a number greater than 5? Well, the only number greater than 5 is 6. So that's the favorable outcome. That's the outcome that happens to make it true. All right, let's look at another question. Okay, I have a bunch of marbles here. It says I randomly choose a marble. I want to know how many possible outcomes are there. All right, well, I'm going to count the marbles to see how many there are, actually. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 8 marbles, so there's 8 possible outcomes. All right, it says, in how many ways can choosing blue occur? Well, there's 2 blues in there, so I'm going to just say 2. Okay, question C says, how many ways can choosing not yellow occur? All right, so not yellow, that'd be this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 not yellow outcomes. All right, and we're not going to look at this last question. All right. Now, you have talked about probability before in previous grades. I know you talked about it last year in 6th grade. So we're going to kind of look at the definition of probability, and you're going to fill this in on your sheet. So it says the probability of an event is a number that measures the likelihood that the event will occur. So basically, it's what are the chances of something happening, or what did happen in an experiment. All right, oftentimes you see probabilities written as fractions. You might have a 1 out of 2 chance, or 3/4. You often see it as fractions, but you can also write those as decimals and percents. All right, so I know like the decimal for half is 0.5 and the percent is 50%. Same thing, 3/4, the decimal is 0.75 and the percent is 75%. All right, so you can see probabilities written as fractions, decimals, or percents. It can be written all three ways. All right, probabilities are between 0 and 1. Okay, if you notice, most probabilities are fractions. So you can have a 0 chance of something happening. And if you have a probability of 1, that means it has a 100% chance of happening. All right, so probabilities are only between 0 and 1. So let's look at this diagram, okay? So let's look at this diagram down here. All right, so if an experiment has a 0 probability, that means there's a 0% chance it'll happen. That's called impossible. All right, an example of that would be if I had a number cube and I said rolling a 7. Well, there's not a 7 on my number cube, so that would be impossible. All right, if I have a probability that is a 4th, okay, that has a 25% chance of happening. Okay, so it doesn't have a really good chance of happening. That's unlikely. All right, if I have a probability of a half, it means it has a 50% chance of happening. If I have a probability of 3/4, 75%, so that's pretty likely to happen. And if it has a probability of 1, that means it has a 100% chance of happening. That's called a certain event. All right, we're going to write a couple more vocab words down. So the first one is an impossible event. Okay, an impossible event is an event that has a probability of 0. Okay, it can't happen. All right, let's give an example of an event that has a 0 chance of happening. All right, so if I have a number cube and I roll and I ask, what's the chances of rolling a 7? Okay, and it's just a normal dice that I throw. Okay, that would have a probability of 0. That's impossible. There's not a 7 on the number cube. All right, the other type of event is a certain event. That's an event that has a probability of 1. Okay, that means it will 100% for sure happen. All right, so an example of a certain event would be if I roll a cube again. So if I roll a cube, what's my chances of getting a number between 1 and 6? Well, that's going to happen every time I roll the cube, so that has a 100% chance of happening. That would be a certain event. Okay, let's take a look at these 4 events. Let's tell whether the event has a probability of 0, which would be impossible, 1, which is certain, or between 0 and 1. I'd like you to pause the video now and answer those 4 questions. What do you think? For 1, 2, 3, and 4. Go ahead and answer those. I'll give you a minute or 2. All right, you should have had a chance to answer these questions. So, rolling a 7 on a dice, we just talked about that. That has a 0 probability, all right? It's impossible. All right, rolling an even number on a number cube. Well, that's going to happen 50% of the time, so that would have a probability of a half, or 50%. All right, winning a coin toss. Well, again, you can either get heads or tails, so that would have a probability of a half, which is 50%. All right, question 4, Miss Owen loving the Packers forever. Well, that, of course, is a certain event, because you know I will. So that would have a probability of 1 or 100%, so that one is certain. All right, so let's continue on. All right, there is something called theoretical probability. Again, this is on your definition sheet. So theoretical probability. This is a probability that can be determined without conducting an experiment. So basically, if I asked you, what's the chances of something happening? For example, if I said, what's the chances of you flipping a coin and getting a heads? So I might ask you, what's the probability of getting a heads? The theoretical probability. Well, you have heads shows up 1 time out of the 2 possible outcomes on a coin. So it has a probability of 1/2. That's called the theoretical probability. Okay, so again, you write it as a fraction. On the bottom is always, well, how many possible outcomes are there? So flipping a coin, there was 2 outcomes. And how many chances are there for you to get a heads? Well, that's just 1, so it's 1/2. That's theoretical probability. Okay, let's look at an example. Okay, so I want to know, I see these number blocks. Question 1 says, what is the theoretical probability of choosing an X? So I look at these number blocks, or these letter blocks. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 blocks. So when I'm doing my probability, there's 7 possible outcomes. Okay, I want to know what's my chances of choosing an X. Well, there's only 1 X in that whole block, so my chances are 1 out of 7. So my probability is 1/7. It's not very likely. Okay, what if I asked you, I'm not going to look at that one. What if I asked you, what's the probability of choosing an E? This is the theoretical probability. All right, this P, parentheses, stands for probability. So the probability of getting an E, I have 2 E's out of 7 blocks. So my probability would be 2/7. That's theoretical probability. All right, so let's look at this example. It says you have a bag of marbles, 4 red, 5 blue, 3 yellow, 6 green. So what's the probability of getting a green? All right, well, there's 6 greens out of, let's add these up, 9, 10, 11, 12, plus 6 is 18 out of 18 total marbles. So my probability is 6/18, or I can simplify that to 1/3. What's the probability of getting a yellow? Well, there's 3 yellows out of 18 marbles. So my theoretical probability, I'm going to simplify that, is 1/6. All right, the other type of probability is called experimental probability. Okay, this is the probability determined by conducting an experiment several times. So you can only figure this probability out after you actually do the experiment. So you have to do the experiment first. Okay, so let's kind of take a look at an example. You guys should have this on your note page. Okay, so I have my table here. Okay, and it says Clay Matthews rolled a number cube several times and recorded his results. Okay, so this is his experiment results. I want to know what was his experimental probability of rolling a 2. So I look, he got 3 2s. Out of, I need to see how many times did he do the experiment. Well, I can add these up. 7 and 3 is 10, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. 3 out of 20 times that he actually rolled the number cube. Okay, let's look at this, rolling an even number. So an even number, he had 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 out of 20. Rolling an odd number. Okay, so the odd numbers are 1, 3, and 5. He had 5 and 7 and 1. So 6 and 7 is 13/20. And rolling a 7, he didn't roll a 7. So the experimental probability was 0 out of 20. All right, we are going to look at one more, all right, type of probability question. So I want you to take a look at these 2 circles. Okay, let's draw a spinner, and let's label that 2 sections are red, 1 is blue. Okay, I want to know what's the probability of spinning a red. Okay, now before we can do this problem, we actually need to make sure that these sections are evenly split. So I'm going to split this blue so it looks like it's the same as the reds. So now my spinner is chunked into 4 sections. All right, so what's the probability of getting a red? Well, there's 2 red sections out of 4 sections. So my probability is 2/4 or a half. All right, the last thing that you need to do, you need to pause this video, okay, right now, and you need to answer these 2 questions. Okay, please answer these questions, have them ready to show me tomorrow during class. All right, if you have questions, just look back at the video and try them again. Okay, so have these 2 questions ready for class tomorrow in your notebook along with your notes filled out.